As an avid traveler, you may already have a bucket list of places that you want to go. Unfortunately, bucket list locations have a habit of being popular tourist destinations as well. And as a landscape photographer, it becomes incredibly difficult to find unique locations or new perspectives. Now, you can wait till you arrive to seek out these unique points of interest, but waiting isn't always an option. Sometimes you need to discover these candidate regions now so you can plan your trip ahead of time before you book those accommodations. So how can you find unique landscape photography locations before your flight takes off? In this vlog, I'll show you how I use the terrain view in Google Maps to discover more unique, magical regions that help yield a diversity of killer views and aren't already on everyone's Instagram, hopefully. Now first off, I'm assuming that you're renting a car for the trip. It goes without saying that if you only pick spots accessible by public transit, you'll be picking spots that are already swamped by other tourists. Check out my vlog on everything you need to know about renting a vehicle in Europe. With the right credit card, a rental car is the easiest and the cheapest way to explore a country, and of course the surest way to find unique locations. I'm going to be searching for landscape photography spots in Ireland and the UK. I was doing this for my trip last year, and I used the terrain view to discover and also to weed out a lot of potential spots before I booked any accommodations. So I'm going to head over to googlemaps.com and let's hop over to Ireland and the UK. Now, initially, I was looking at two regions in the United Kingdom that I was trying to decide which one I wanted to spend more time in. Now, first, you'll notice that, of course, a lot of these areas are in green. This is usually a really great place to start. The green areas signify national parks or reserves. Now, they're not guaranteed to be scenic, but in general, it's a great place to start. So I was looking at the Peak District. Unfortunately, when I zoom in on here, there's not really a lot of detail that would help me figure out what the region is like. Are there a lot of mountains? Are there a lot of valleys? Or is it just really flat? I couldn't really tell this from this particular view. So if you come over here to the sidebar and then click in the menu, you can switch from map view to terrain view. And the terrain view is simply rich with incredible insights, especially if you're interested in capturing more mountainous topography. So when I look around the Peak District, what you'll notice is that the southern portion of the Peak District is fairly flat. There's not a lot going on. But as soon as you come up here to the northern portion of the Peak District, there is so much more topography here. Notice there's a lot more blacks. This tells me that there's much more variation in altitude, meaning there's probably going to be cliffs and mountains and valleys and lakes and other really cool phenomena. So when I went to book my accommodations, rather than staying near the center or the southern portion of the park, I actually stayed just outside Sheffield because that was really close to the region that had the most interest to me. However, my original question was, did I want to spend more of my time in the Peak District or in the Lake District? And with the terrain view turned on, there's a night and day difference in the Lake District. You'll notice that now the Lake District is full of these really deep blacks, which tells me that there are some really steep gorges in here and some incredible mountains. You'll also notice that the space between some of these ridges is a little bit larger than it was in the Peak District. That means there are larger valleys and larger vistas to take pictures of. And then, of course, as the name suggests, there are tons of lakes that form a great backdrop. So I picked all this up before I booked any accommodations. But when I got there, this was actually my experience. When I went to the Peak District, it was very flat, lots of rolling hills, not much to it. It didn't really provide enough contrast to make the scene interesting. Whereas when I got to the Lake District, it was more like Scotland. You had these incredible cliffs and mountains, and really, they should have called it the Mountain District. Unfortunately, I didn't book nearly as much time in the Lake District as I would have liked to, but it was really cool to see that you could get a pretty good idea of which regions would be the most interesting, especially for my preferred genre of mountainscapes. For some of the other locations I wanted to go along the coast, things work a little bit differently, in particular for coastal photography. So I'm going to hop over here to Ireland, which was the first part of my trip. And for most of the trip, I was starting out in southwestern Ireland, down here along the Wild Atlantic Way. One of the main locations we wanted to see was the Dingle Peninsula, and that's this region over here. And before I used terrain view, I couldn't really tell where I should spend most of my time, but as soon as I turned on this view, I saw very quickly, wow, there are all these incredible mountain ranges that I should check out. And in particular, here's the Connor Pass. Connor Pass was one of my favorite regions in the Dingle Peninsula just before you came into town. That incredible drama was reflected right here in terrain view. In particular, terrain view can really help you when looking at coastlines. What tends to happen along coastlines is that if they face north and south, the sunset and sunrise is always over the water or directly inland. That doesn't give too much interest. It doesn't really allow you to frame some of the incredible elements that go along the coast. So in particular, I look for coasts that don't run quite north or south, but more in an east or westerly direction. So as I was looking along the coast, I looked for any stretch that ran not north and south, but more east and west, which thankfully most of the Dingle Peninsula does run east and west. So really this whole coastline is incredible. But once you've figured out a general portion of the coast, the more interesting ones are going to have more mountains nearby. So this region is kind of interesting. But also the more broken coastlines will give you more unique perspectives and viewpoints. So for example, this area over here is maybe a little bit boring. There's not too many perspectives you could get of the coastline. Whereas if you come up here to the northern portion of the Dingle Peninsula, there are all of these incredible inlets and coves that break up the coastline and give you more perspectives to shoot from. So here was a really interesting region I could have shot from. In particular, I spent my time on the Wild Atlantic Way down here over in Slay Head. If you look at Slay Head, it's broken with all these little peninsula and juts. That turned out to be a really interesting perspective to shoot from because I could always take the road and shoot at various angles at some of the peninsulas or the heads that were sticking out into the water. So as you plan your trip, start with general regions like Southwest Ireland or Northern Wales and use Terrain View to hunt down specific points of interest. It's not flawless, but more often than not, I find it helps me discover unique locations, or at least stunning locations that I otherwise wouldn't have discovered without a fair number of Google searches. Make sure to check out the full write-up on fstoppers.com for more techniques to discover unique landscapes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more digital nomad tips and landscape photography tutorials.